Welcome to Rune Soup, a podcast about magic, culture and the paranormal, coming to you from sunny West London. My name is Gordon and I shall be your host. Enjoy. Today on Rune Soup, we have a very special Christmas or holiday episode for you. And so without further ado, rather than from West London, coming to you from the other side of the world, Newcastle, Australia, my mother, the Psychonaut, Trisha White. How are you?
I'm very well, and welcome to everybody else who may be listening. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas there, straight from Australia, where it was warm yesterday. It's now cold. It's actually genuinely 20 degrees Celsius colder today than it was yesterday.
That's Australia.
Yeah, that's true. Well, speaking of, kind of, so, Mother, were you a weird kid?
I didn't think so. Maybe other people did. But yeah, it's probably a little bit different. Yes.
Imaginary friends, any of that kind of thing?
I guess the earliest experience of being a little different was an All Saints and All Souls Day, and I went to a Catholic school, and the nuns had us going into the church to pray for all souls, the lost souls, etc., to bring them out of limbo. And I'm, fervently praying, and I'm looking up at the altar and seeing the angels on the altar. And I came out, we were going round, in and out of the church, but you had to go in and out, couldn't just stay there. Each entry made a new soul, released a new soul, and I said to the nuns, "Oh, look at all the lovely angels on the altar, aren't they beautiful?" And of course they then thumped me. Don't make up lies, that sort of stuff. So I then thought, nobody else must be seeing these angels, it's just me. So from an early age I learned to be quiet about stuff I saw. That's probably my first concrete example of don't tell people what you see.
I remember being a kid, and when Sister Act came out at the movies, we went with a friend of yours who was also schooled by nuns, and you were both basically rolling in the aisles with laughter. So, I mean, was that kind of... You would hope, and I guess it wasn't the case, and you can speak to this, that nuns would have been kind of better disposed to their kids having spiritual experiences, but maybe not?
You could be religious, but you couldn't talk about people like seeing things. No, you had to really be a nun to experience that, yeah. I don't know what they thought about the people at Fatima or at Lourdes when they had their experiences, because they then became saints, obviously, but they didn't look kindly on the people who saw things, or... No, that was different.
Well, Australia turned it around on the nun front, because our first saint is a nun.
I know, I was there for that.
You
were?
were?
There for the canonization, which was amazing, absolutely amazing. The energy that came down was astounding. Because energetically, you can have all your thoughts about the power, the male power, or the power, physical power of men or people, the greed power in a church. But the energetic power of a church is still enormous. So on the day of the canonization, when they brought all that energy together, the energy was blue as though it was coming down onto the altar. And when they say the words to bring it down and bring the canonization in, as it hit the altar, it just crashed out in gold. The whole place turned gold. It was astounding. And there were so many giant beings there. It was incredible. The energy was completely still before it started. It was crystalline. It was so solid. And then this giant blue ray came down, energetically crystal blue, and hit it. And then just everything went gold as they brought the power down to turn them into saints. It was amazing. That turning of the energy was just astounding to watch. Amazing thing to be there for.
Yeah, that was in Rome, wasn't it?
In Rome,
in St. Peter's.
St. Peter's, yeah. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, as some of the long-time readers know, my mother, the Psychonaut, got that handle because she's been on quite a few spiritual adventures around the world, which we will certainly get to. That's one of them. I don't think we've had anyone who's, been at St. Peter's while they essentially build a god.
Yeah, it was just astounding to, and the feeling, the energy of the people coming. You see these giant beings were just lying up the stairs, huge things. So because I couldn't see anything. The energy was so crystalline. I kept saying, "Where are you? Where are you?" And I said, "Oh, for heaven's sake, we're here, we're here." And then these giant beings were just lying there. So they were actually organising, bringing this, and it's bringing energy down into the earth. It's not necessarily turning physical beings into saints, into something different, but they were bringing this massive amount of energy into the earth and into the physicality of the whole being a part of the earth. And it was just amazing. It's like something, you could feel the wave of it come through. It was just, people were knocked off their feet. But it was just brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
So at the moment, one of the things in the kind of Western magical tradition is the return of the saints, because they've sort of been sidelined since the 60s as people, perhaps quite rightly, when magic got caught up in feminism and eco-movements and all that kind of thing, people rejected probably too much of the Christian component of the Western tradition. And it's been in the last few years that people are rediscovering that. So I will get back to the childhood stuff, but that is very interesting and ties in with some of the discussions we've been having on the show and just discussions I've been having with weirdos in general. When you say tying the energy to the earth, explain your perception of the saint making, because it may appear quite familiar to people listening.
Well, there were 7 saints on that day, people being made or canonised, and that was bringing the works to me, that they were people who had achieved not purification of the soul. Their souls themselves had grown very strong and very large. As the people were discussed and they came up to read out what they had done, you could feel the energy bodies. They all differed in size, but 3 of their energy bodies were very big. There was a woman and a man and the lady that
Mary McKillop.
Mary McKillop, thank you. In Australia, they were very big compared to the other 4, and the energy they developed on the earth is quite large. Like a guru, basically a guru. And that's what they're bringing back down into the earth to be used again. And that's what happens, I believe, when they make them into saints, so that they connect them again to the physical. So they can be, gurus, so they can people can help, praying to them and bringing their energy back down to be used again. Or they can help people again. They're still half implanted on the earth. They don't have to physically be here. So they're connecting the physical to the spiritual or the metaphysical in a better way, a stronger way.
So I haven't heard this story before in the detail we're hearing it now, but I'm telling you that there are a lot of people out there listening who would use different words but know exactly what you're talking about when it comes to the saints, and their kind of role and function in a sort of wider spiritual or magical model. So that's fascinating, and we'll come back to some of that as we move further along. But let's wind back to being a kid. So after school, when you sort of realise that these things are real and discretion is the better part of valour, growing up in regional Australia in a school run by nuns, at what stage what was the next step on that journey for you?
I suppose I spent a lot of time not so much using clairvoyance, but using my sensory perception of stuff. So I was very much aware that I could, like driving along in a car, for instance, I could look, sense rather than look, what were happy homes, what were divorced homes. That sense was the next one to really develop, being aware what was happening, sense of danger, sense of sadness, sense of fear, in and around me, in and around people, that kind of thing developed very strongly. That was the next thing that came. So that part of my energy system developed. So I became more aware of what was going on. That kind of sense within me, my energy system grew. So that was the next part of my energy body to develop, rather than my clairvoyance. So probably I wasn't using that as much. No. It was definitely that part of my energy field expanded more, going out physically going out quite a distance with it, to sense out like a big wave, stretching out, feeling things, knowing what was going on around me, and over a distance. And I think that was the forerunner of being able to heal, to sense out over distances to what's happening and where it is. That was the next stretch in what I was doing.
So that was before your orphanage triggered OBE?
Yeah, that came a lot later. That was yeah, that was yes, that was not a pleasant time.
No. Radio. So, I mean, are there any other nun stories before we leave school?
I kind of blocked those out.
Yeah, as you do. Cool. So, I mean, moving into university, were there any kind of books that were big at the time? I mean, we're sort of looking at the 70s here, so we know what was big. There's your Castaneda and all that kind of thing.
But I remember seeing Uri Geller, which was a real fascinating experience, seeing him and in Newcastle, and going to see him and having people bringing hundreds and hundreds of broken watches, and they weren't digital in those; they were wind-up watches in those days. They had no batteries and things in them, and put them out on the stage. And I took one. It belonged to a girlfriend that hadn't worked for 10 or 12 years. Put it out on the stage, and he just did whatever he did to them, and they all worked. It was fascinating. My girlfriend we had to walk home. She drove the car. She sat on the keys, and they bent. She wasn't even trying to bend them, and all sorts. To me, it was absolutely fascinating because I hadn't any idea in those days that you could do that with energy or metals and things. And doing the thing where you lift people up with 2 fingers, and he did all that stuff. So that was really fascinating, seeing him and what can be done with energy and lifting and bending and moving, and the idea of putting energy through people and into things and moving metal, and that was an absolute eye-opener. And I think that was a fascinating thing to see.
And what year was that, give or take?
72, 73, maybe a bit later, 74.
Probably. Well,
no, maybe a bit later. No, that would have been 76.
There you go. So he was also, I mean, he is a Mossad agent. He was doing remote viewing for the CIA at Stanford Research Institute at the same time.
Well, there we are.
So the trip might have been an op.
It could have been. Yeah. Not that he may have been looking at the BHP or something sort of. Oh, maybe the Air Force in here. I don't know. But it was absolutely fascinating what he could do. I can't remember all the things he did, but it was astounding. But all these watches just started to work, and it worked for a long while. So I don't know how. I'm not sure. I still don't know how he did that, but it was very clever.
Oh no, he's the real deal. He's just also a spy and all that. Which you deal with multifaceted people when you deal with the spirit world. So that's just what happens. Yeah. I mean, Dr. D was a spy.
Really?
Yeah, he had 007 as his sign-off. He was the first 007 for Elizabeth I.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
So that kind of connection has always been there. So everyone who comes on the show and talks usually has the book. The book that they first encountered, even if it's a terrible book. I mean, mine weren't particularly good, but they usually have the book, and they know they can kind of date their life before they found this book and then after. Do you have the book, and when did you find it?
No, I have to think hard about that. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we'll come back to
that. Yeah.
Because, I mean, some of the stories... so if we move into university, you were studying psychology and teaching.
Yeah.
I mean, why? Does that sort of mind thing...
The mind thing's always interested me, yeah. And I went out teaching first, out to the country, to Gunnedah, Scone and Parkes. And then I decided I'd come back and do a Masters in Psych. So I came back to Newcastle and did that. So
living out in the country, this is Western New South Wales for people who maybe don't know where Parkes, New South Wales is because they live in anywhere else.
It's near the Giant Telescope.
There you go.
The movie The Dish.
Yeah, they'll know that one. We have a lot of space nerds who listen. So tell us about, I mean, there's some stories I'm leading you towards here.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about living in Gunnedah and Parkes.
Well, Gunnedah was, it's very rural and it has, which story?
The haunted house.
Oh, the haunted house was in Parks. That was a crack up. And we got this house, the two other girls and I. And it was a lovely very old house with lovely yellow roses out the front, a very country red brick tiled roof. Very old. We had a funny lean-to back to it. And fortunately I got the room to the left and the poor girl got this other one of the girls got the room to the right. And she got a bit crazy after a couple of months. And then one day she came into me and she said, "Trish, I can't shut the bedroom door." And I thought, oh, for heaven's sake. And I went up and it was ajar. And I pulled it and I pulled back and it pulled back and it pulled back. And anyway, I just slammed it on it and came and sat down. It didn't worry me. And she was a bit thin. But apparently there was a ghost in her room. But we'd be sitting there watching television and this little ghost would go like a little swirl of smoke up the hall, chased by the cat. None of this worried me, but it worried the other two girls quite a bit. But but what had happened was there'd been a couple living there fighting over one woman, and the guy had chased the other guy out the backyard and murdered him with a knife. So we assume it was one of the fellows in the house. But I hadn't tuned in, and it actually didn't worry me. It wasn't so aggro, but obviously that had been his bedroom, and he didn't like the girl in it. He was forever going up and down the hall, thumping things and trying to vacuum, and it was quite funny. I'd open the door and I'd say, "Stop it!" And I'd shut the door and he'd go away. Usually Saturday morning really early he'd be up vacuuming at 6 o'clock or something. But
so relatively benign, really, for a murder victim.
That's right, yeah. So he was quite but he used to obviously annoy her in the other room. But yes.
So that's probably where I get my live and let live response to the spirits from, which is actually quite unpopular or a minority opinion amongst magicians. If they find a ghost, they have to move it along. I don't care. It's an ecosystem. You move the bad ones along.
Yes, there's some unpleasant ones. I think the ones that travel a bit, I've found that when I've had to move something on, they're the ones that you need to be moved on because they've moved in where they shouldn't be, usually with some kind of malcontent in them and a nasty reason for coming in. They're the ones that need to go.
In a lot of the, in parts of the Afro-Caribbean tradition, they distinguish classes of spirits, as did the Greeks in their own sort of way, that a difference between a wandering spirit and a located spirit. Yeah. But I think in the case of this murder victim, he was there first, and if he's one, not violent and not in obvious pain himself, then it's kind of his house.
Yes, yeah, that's right. I think that, and he, I don't know, someone may have moved him on later on, but he didn't worry us. He just wander up and down the hall, except the vacuuming was a bit annoying. Yeah, so quite funny.
And was this where you were doing automatic writing as well? Another very 70s
Oh,
thing?
no, that was Gundar. I'd forgotten all about that. Yeah, that was quite funny. Yes, that was my first introduction to automatic writing, and I used to write all sorts of stuff. The cleaners taught us about that at the school, and they did a lot of this automatic writing and introduction. That was interesting, yeah. I forgot. That was a long time ago, yeah. Forgot all about that, yeah. And they were doing it, and they showed us this, and I thought, oh, this is the way to go. And they put it down and tune in, but you have to be very careful with that because there's a lot of astral stuff. You have to tune in very clearly, or you get cheeky people, unpleasant people come along and write for you, and that's not a very trustworthy form of communicating with spirit. So you really have to be very clear and know what you're getting it from. So people who do it, you have to feel correctly where it's coming from when you're in your channel. Otherwise, you get some rubbish coming through. So anybody who's trying it, just be very clear when you tune in. Make sure it's coming down clearly through your antakarana and not from somewhere else. If you're practicing it out there, where you get some rubbish stuff.
Right, so bringing the story back from Western New South Wales into Newcastle and the Masters, that's about the time you met a future Dr. Alan White?
Yes, it was, yes. When I came back to do the Master's degree, yeah.
And did you introduce him to Mrs. C?
I did. Yes, I used to go to an extremely good clairvoyant lady we used to call Mrs. C. That was her name. And yeah, she was very, very good. And she used to call him Bill, because obviously a name from a past life. But she was very clever, very spot on. And yeah, she said, told me when I was actually at university that I'd marry Alan. And so, well, first time I was there, so he was 7 or 8 years beforehand. Meet a dark-haired professional man, not be all of his life, only part of it, which is basically true. Yeah, so, well, was true, yeah. And a whole lot of other stuff. Told me where I'd live and all these sorts of things. And
Well, see, I remember this story because it was Dad's first experience with someone who could do this, because he was very impressed how weirdly specific she would be. The example that really did it for him was she told him, I see you bandaging someone's bloodied head, you're standing on some stairs, you're sort of halfway up, and he was someone, when he was at work as a registrar at a hospital in Newcastle, someone fell down the stairs outside in front of him and injured their head, and being a doctor and what have you, he's bandaging them up, and he didn't stop to think about it because, you know, you're in an emergency medical situation, so you do that. But he was halfway through and suddenly realised he's bandaging a bloodied head halfway up the stairs. Yes, yeah. And that's not, you know, a tall, dark and handsome stranger. That's spot on. And that was for him, as a psychiatrist, obviously, a piece that stuck in the back of his head to say there's definitely something wider about this. So that's why I remember who she is. Yeah, she
said to him another time, you'd be coming around a corner and someone would have come out of a window above you in the same hospital, psychiatric hospital. And that happened too. You walk around a corner, someone comes out a window. So her details were very concrete in what she said. Yeah.
You've had some quite good psychics over the years, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I went to a gypsy reader in Palmwood who was absolutely spot on, and I can't remember all the time, talking about reading my palms, and I'm a fire and water palm, which is really rare, and all sorts of stuff, and he was really spot on with details. So there's been some very good ones that I've gone to. Yeah.
And we had, I forget her name, that woman who was sort of out on the edges of town, who was also weirdly descriptive, like Mrs. C. So we'd go and visit her and she'd say, I see you singing, I got the song wrong, I'm in the Money, holding a big yellow golden coin on stage. And that was actually years before the Year 10 musical, which that exact thing happened. And much like Mrs. C, you go, that is very specific.
Yes, that's right.
You're not doing that leading answers thing here. You're not interpreting my body language to see whether or not that's a true or false answer. That's quite weirdly specific.
Yes. And that was cool. Yeah. They were clever.
So, I mean, what happened? You got married. You obviously, then the best thing that ever happened to you, happened. What were the motherhood years like? I mean, are there any stories that sort of align with this kind of thing? Otherwise, we can talk about me as a baby. There's, defending me from a giant rat at Christmas. There's all kinds of great stories. But if there's anything, because I'd be interested to see someone who's had, a reasonable experience of spirit contact, and then what motherhood was like. Because we have a friend of yours, who used to live up the road, who could tell she was pregnant because she could see auras when it happened. So Teresa Gordon, for instance, was that her or her friend?
Okay, well, I think it was Teresa, yeah.
Yeah. So, did anything like that happen? I thought that would be a really interesting pregnancy test if you could wake up and start to see auras and you go,
Well, I could actually tell that I was pregnant the moment I conceived. Energetically, I could feel it. So I knew I was pregnant the second that conception occurred. So that was really, I thought was weird, but that was bang. I thought, that's happened. And I just had to wait wait long enough.
The science to catch up.
It's happened. It's fine. It's over now, I'm done. It's finished. But that, I could feel it, that conception thing, I could feel the thing happen. So that was interesting. So that was that sort of thing. I don't know that I I can't think now. It's so long ago.
Well, it's not that long. I mean,
No, it's not that long. He says
you raised 3 kids,
yeah,
and so we might describe that as the motherhood years. But otherwise we jump past them because your sort of psychonaut years began as my youngest brother was, you know, getting towards the end of school, or at least high school, so he could take care of himself and doesn't require full-time mothering. And then you kind of essentially dived right back in and have never looked back. So I'm just trying to see if there's any stories in motherhood land that you'd like to recount, or otherwise we jump into the psychonaut.
Yeah, not that I can really. They probably were, just that you put everything on hold, basically.
So I can remember there's, I mean, I've mentioned the bookstore that was a cornerstone of me finding this stuff, which is now no longer there, as is the fate of most bookstores. But I remember we were looking at some books in there, and I think it was Janet Farrar's Witch's Bible, but there was some sort of like Irish sayings in that you remember your grandmother saying.
Yes, my grandmother had. Yeah, she had a lot of like what you used to call kitchen witch stuff, but she had an Irish background. No, Australian born, but that she had all those Irish kitchen type stuff, rhymes and things that she would sing and say and understood, even though, you know, she's Irish Catholic, but so she had that kind of legacy. And my mother was quite psychic about stuff. She could always say, "Oh, that's so and so on the phone, ringing," so that it's there in the family. But she never did anything with it. But she always knew things were going to happen. And my grandmother was the same. My grandmother was quite nurturing and healing to be around. And I don't know what her mother, my great-grandmother, was, in the inverted commas, saintly person in that she cared for all the, like vagabonds you'd call them overseas, all our, what do you call them?
Homeless people?
Yeah, the homeless people, but the guys who used to walk out the back, the swaggies.
Oh yeah,
what we call
swagmen,
swaggies.
so hobos, rail riders.
Yeah, all of those kind of guys. And they were always fed and you know, looked after, and they lived out in the country. So they were all welcome, they all came, and she died very young, about 48, having had multiple children. But they were always welcome. She cared, had this massive open heart for people, and fed and nurtured and healed people. Not like a doctor, but you know, was always there with remedies and stuff. So she had this wonderful feeling for people. So I think that was part of what it was all about. So she was apparently, didn't get to meet her, a lovely human being. So I think that was there in this lineage that we're part of. Yeah. Cool.
So when you started to get a bit more of your adult life back, as the kids became adults themselves, it seems from memory that the sort of initial way back in was through different energy healing courses and groups, and then on to Satya Sai Baba and staying at his ashram a couple of times. So kind of talk us through that phase.
Yeah, I think for me I was always interested in angelic things, but the first thing I really hit the spot for me was pranic healing. So I went and did the first course of pranic healing, and I was very fortunate to be able to train with the Grandmaster, Chokok Sui, who was just the most amazing person, and his energy was huge. So I was able to do my training with him up to our Hatha Yoga as well. So I was very lucky to have a guru like that. So to have 2 physical gurus, people have gurus. He's here in Sai Baba here. We're in my meditation room. So I've been very blessed to have to be trained by 2 physical gurus. And pranic healing is an amazing thing to do. It is so strong and so effective for you and for anybody you're working with. So I did my training with that, and it's a wonderful modality. And then I was able to go to be called to Sai Baba, because when I'd be meditating, I didn't know who Sai Baba was, but the word would come in as someone to call in, Sai Baba, Sai Baba. So I actually went to the book hog and found the book on Sai Baba, this funny little book, and thought, oh, this is who he is. So I found out a bit more and was able to go to India, go to the ashram was just astounding. I understand why people don't come home from ashrams. They are so peaceful and beautiful, and you're in this amazing energy. And your whole system, your whole body just grows, or energy in your body just grows, and so much clears, and you feel yourself lifting up layers and layers of stuff. Just the most beautiful thing. To be in the energy of somebody who has such a big energy body is just beautiful. And be where thousands of other people who think the same way and feel the same way. Just beautiful. It's a lovely experience. So it was wonderful, and I was, very grateful to have been there and to have experienced such a thing. So yeah, it was lovely. So that made a big difference for me.
There's been a few of those big energy types. I remember around this time, I was at university in Sydney, and the Dalai Lama was there. But you've seen him several times, haven't you?
I have seen the Dalai Lama several times. Yeah, it's just astounding. He's another enormous energy, and his energy is of compassion and joy. Just to be in his presence and hear his teachings are just wonderful. He's done such a tremendous job worldwide for what he's done for people, for the West, not just for his own people, but for the West, what he's brought through for a lot of people that felt lost and lonely, and the consciousness that he's created for so many people, and not created, but raised the consciousness of so many people, me included. I'm very grateful for his teachings. It's just astounding to make people so much more aware of who they are themselves, and the clarity of thought he brings to people is astounding. And,
joy is the right word. That's the right
he's
description
full.
of it. In a funny way, I think, having had that experience, I can recognise joy in spirit because I know if it feels like him.
Yeah.
It's a really good description.
Yeah.
It's like a big joy bubble. But so at the end, for people who don't know Sydney, as well as maybe they know Parks or Gunnedah, the entertainment centre is in between sort of Chinatown and one of the harbours. And so we'd be walking through Chinatown on the way to the entertainment centre, and you could feel, you walked into it like a wall, like an energy wall, about 2 blocks back. You couldn't even see the entertainment centre, and you sort of turned the corner and it got stronger and stronger. But it was, if you stepped back from that bubble, you wouldn't feel it. It was honestly like walking into a wall of energy or water, and it was fascinating because it was larger than the entertainment centre, and it spread out across several blocks. And that was my first experience with something that large embodied in a human form. Because we've been to various places. Like this was after we went to New Orleans, and so I've been to New Orleans twice because Mother went when she was pregnant with me, but the first time I went actually walking around on my own 2 feet. We went to Marie Laveau's tomb, and there are places like that you just walk into this energy bubble. But this one follows around this little Tibetan man.
Yes, and the whole place gets his laugh. He gets the vibration of him. It's lovely. Yeah. I've been to a few of these things. He's amazing.
So what was, not really say what was next, because as you say, we're in the meditation room, and Chokok Sui and Sai Baba and everyone's up there on the altar space. But, what's the next stage in the journey? You started going on, so you've been to probably, if you list off the places that you've been and the things you've done on a spiritual travel pilgrimage sense, people are going to be very, very jealous. But let's talk through your 20 years of psychonauting, Machu Picchu, Wales in Tonga.
Yes.
Talk through some of these, some travel stories.
Oh, wow. I sort of I get told where to go, I guess. They sort of suggest where I go. The big ones. Peru is amazing. Just the most amazing place to go. Wonderful people and amazing energy. The energy is just so different, and it's sort of it's enlightening and refined, even though the country isn't. The country is not a first world country, but you get out into this beautiful country and most wonderful flowers and landscapes are so different, and the energy is just so intense. Fabulous doorways into this energy. If you ever get the chance, and people who've been there probably saying, nodding their heads saying yes, yes. You go there and it's like going, when you go to Machu Picchu, it's like going into it. It is a temple, obviously, but it's like going to this familiar temple. Like walking back into a giant library or university of energy. And when you get there, don't forget to open the doorway. And you get there, ask to go through the first energetic doorway as you go in. And it's like walking through a waterfall. It's so strong. And you walk into this, through this doorway, and you're in there, and you just feel all these codes coming towards you. And it's light, but it's strong, and it's amazing. You go through, and there's all the different lunar temples and women's temples, and it's just lovely. It's so many places to sit down and absorb. And with your body and your eyes, it's just stunning. Every terrace has something else. And it's joyful too. You see they've got the llama, the animal llama, is walking around. And the stones are so strong. You put your hand on them and feel them. It's just beautiful. The water is carrying all the energy up through the mountains, and it's just brilliant. It's just the most amazing place to be in. And you look across, we were lucky to be there for the equinox in June. Just beautiful. And the solstice, thank you. I get into the space and I can't get the words out. Sorry about that. I just get in the space, I'm just seeing it all. I think, oh God, it was just so astounding. And the sun coming down on everything, it was just brilliant. It was one of the most wonderful things to have been there for. It's just superb. There's another doorway. It's actually a bit like, it's like a dragon's entry. Like you come up, you have to, it's a bit of they're all a climb, and you come up through this thing, and you have to step through, come up the razorback, and you step through the doorway, and you go down the other side, and it's a dimensional doorway, and there's 3 spaces on it, and you get up, and it looks like a test tube. The first one you stand in, and it rushes down across, and you come into the doorway where you put your nose and your heart against the wall, and you can see into each level of the space. There's the physical, you talk to the spirits on the other side, the ones who physically left, and ask about the physical world. You can ask about the next layer up, about what's happening on your, like the people who've just left, and the 3rd level up, you ask about the God levels in their space. It's just wonderful, and you can just see the spaces as you go through all the different. It's all like a red level map as you go through. You zoom out into it, and then you can't get away from it. It just holds you, anchors you against it, and then you go into the next. It looks like it's all carved into the rock. It's like a test tube space, and you go and stand in that, and then the energy comes back down through it and anchors everything you've seen. It's just the most amazing dimensional doorway. Beautiful. Yeah, it's just great place to go. Put it on your list.
Where else is on the list? I'm just trying to rattle off the top of my head. Egypt stories, anything?
Oh yes, Egypt. Well, that's a bit harder to get to at present. For me, the Isis temple, even though it has been moved, the energy's still there. That was just beautiful. And Karnak, of course. But, they were just lovely. But yeah.
So what about the bits you can tell us about anyway? Tell us a bit about going out into the desert with the Aboriginal women.
I was very fortunate to be able to go and spend time with the women elders on sacred women's land, or women's sacred land rather, and that was amazing to learn women's business. They are the most amazing women. They are so connected to the earth and to the earth stories and to each other. They're very compassionate to each other, very supportive, and they are, how do you describe it? their whole society is held together by these stories and by tribal law, which these women, the older women, live. Their stories are very layered. Everything they do is backed up by a story and supported by song and dance, and they dance with a skirt and the top's naked, and they paint the body. You paint your body with various patterns, and they're all symbolic of the story and either protection or meaning, but more protection and symbolism, I suppose. Yeah. So you have certain steps for each thing, and it comes from the back. You have a flat place, and you come from the back forward, and you sing and dance as you come forward. And they do that, and they start, the ceremony will start sort of in the late afternoon, go right into the night. And you have to stay awake. They don't like it if you fall asleep. There's no falling asleep. But these women are amazing. Now, some of them are about 70, between 70 and 80 years old. And we'd be sitting there doing this stuff, and the minute spirit comes into these, and then they're arthritic and everything. When spirit comes into the body, they just get up, and they're like 18-year-olds. The way they move, the way they sing and the way they move is just wonderful. You see the spirit in their body coming through. It's just brilliant. So, no, they're, looks like it. But for me, the thing that I found interesting, because I like the story of the seven sisters of the Pleiades, that story is there in the Aboriginal culture. It's in Egypt.
It's in my book.
Oh, it's in lots of it's in lots of cultures now. That Aboriginal culture is 50,000 years old, and that story is 50,000. Their story is 50,000 years old, but it was there before it had any contact with any other race. So that, I wonder, did someone come down from the stars and give it to them?
See, obviously Mother hasn't read my book yet because it's not yet out, but she's describing, there's a couple of chapters towards the beginning which you'll find very interesting and hopefully familiar, because this is in there.
And I've got one of my paintings I got from one of the ladies did, is about the story.
Oh, we'll talk about that once the recording is done. Speaking of dead, tell us what happened when you were out there and one of the elders died. They all came in.
Oh, yeah, they came rushing across, the spirits came across the ground.
Well, when you came back, you told me that someone in the tribe had died, and these people had walked for days, so obviously before this person had died.
Yeah, so when an elder dies, and Australia's a big country, they all come in, whether it's northwest Australia or it's northwest Queensland, they all come in, everybody comes to meet, and they stay off the country for a while, like so many days, and then it's 3 weeks before they can go onto that country. They have the ceremony, and then they come back off, and it's quite so many months before they can go onto that man or woman's country. It's sacred, so they have to, not a piece of spirit, but they don't go on the ground after he's been, or she has been buried, for so many weeks and months and stuff afterwards. And then it's called sorry country. The country is sorry that they've died, so they don't walk on it. And then after a certain amount of time, I can't remember exactly what it is, they're allowed to go back onto it.
What interests me about this is that people will start the journey. As you say, it's a big country, there's not a lot of phones, and there's no phone signal. And they'll show up in time for it or just afterwards, in the sense that they would have had to have left before the person had expired. And if you look at the early colonial encounters with the sort of Australian First Nations people, there's an Aboriginal object called a Bullroarer, which is essentially a piece of wood on a string or a piece of rope that you sort of whirl around, and it makes a roaring sound. And they used to think that they used this to communicate, but it actually only makes one sound. And the sound is there to attract the attention, because it travels. You stand on a rock and it goes for miles and miles, but if you hear it, it's an Aboriginal telephone, then they just tune in. And the actual message is delivered on a consciousness level. And this was the thing that people, early settlers or explorers encountered. And they thought, how are you guys actually talking to each other across hundreds of miles of desert? And it was that they had very developed, or have very developed psi abilities. And it's interesting to me that it shows up like in the death of a prominent tribesperson, that they'll know as the person is dying 100 kilometres away and get up and start the walk to show up in time.
But they are very telepathic because there are other people at this thing, and there are certain things you weren't allowed to do on sacred land, like smoke and stuff like this, whatever. And some of these people were sneaking off further into the bushes to do it. Of course, the women knew, and they'd say, don't do that. And they'd say, how do they know? I said, for Christ's sake, they're telepathic. What do you think? Do you not think that they know what you're doing these other things? Oh, they'd say.
Why do you think you're out in the desert? Why did you come here for if you didn't think they could do this?
If you didn't think they could do this. So it was quite funny. But one of these nights when we sat up, and a lot of the women couldn't cope with the energy, they weren't there. There's only a few of us seeing these amazing dancers. And they were very, very sacred, just huge. And while we were doing them, men sent energy across, and it came like this weird thing, swept across the dancing field, and they got really, it was actually knocked them down, and it was really quite distressing. They said, "Oh, what's happening?" I said, "It's gone that way. It's gone that way," and got up and quickly leapt up and did something else, because they'd sent like a drone, not a drone, but
energy drone, yeah.
And then it come energy drone to see what the women, because it was very, very sacred, and the men were not to see it. So we all leapt up and did another dance while they did this other thing. It was really interesting, but it was like a funny thing came whooshing over the top of the thing, not an energy ball, but it was a bit like that, but it was quite weird. Shot over the top of what they were doing. It was huge energy. It was amazing.
Do the women do the same thing to the men?
I didn't ask. They wouldn't have told me anyway.
True. I bet they do.
But one of the women who came from Melbourne had fallen over and cracked her kneecap before she came, but she still came. So I was privileged enough to help one of the Aboriginal women, and I worked on her knee to heal it. So that was very good. So that worked. So that was nice.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's consider other. I mean, I'm just looking up at the various things you've got from all over the world. Do you want to talk about the whales? Do you want to talk about Cuba? Do you want Lords? You've been to Lords?
Well, that was fun. I've been to Ireland. It's quite a bit of them. I don't know. The whales were amazing. Everyone gets to go to Tonga and swim with the whales. That was astounding. To connect with a whale. Had a one-on-one with a whale, a giant whale. It's a lot of Atlantean energy in Tonga. It's one of the places that they were before they went across to Peru, to the South America things, before they took form, and half went into whales and half went human. So it was quite a separation there. A lot of the energy went down into the coral. The big energy there was sitting there, these giant beings came in. I've got photos of it actually. Very strange, very big energy that came in there. So we had some amazing meditations of these people coming, actually holding your feet. That's what we were there for Tsunami. It was just,
I remember.
I was ringing Gordon. What's happened?
I was at the Discovery Channel in London, so we had this sort of emergency network of people ringing because you couldn't get signal to call Australia, so I'd call from London, and then I'd be speaking to my brothers who were still in Australia and kind of relaying news and updates. Because you were there for a tsunami and the whole ocean went out.
It did. Because we had the earthquake first, and I thought she was shaking my bed, and she thought I was shaking hers. And no, we opened the window right on the water in this building. And where'd the water go? Yeah, but.
So, all right, of all the places. I'm just trying to think, you've been honestly all over, and you're walking the Camino early next year, because that would have been really, when you think about everywhere that you've so far gone journeying. Other than Peru, where do you recommend for people who are like, I want to go and encounter spirit in these places?
I think you can probably encounter spirit anywhere. I mean, it's
so
funny.
then why do you travel then? Why do you go to these places? Because you're correct, but why do you go?
I guess because I think if I go looking to, I think because something in my past life is calling me. I'm not sure what it is till I get there. I think for me a good example of that was in Ireland, when we went to, I can't remember the name of the place now. Dear oh dear.
It wasn't Roscommon.
No, that was where my family came from, in Roscommon. But we went to where they had the visitation, that God, mine's a blank.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Anyway, where they had a Virgin Mary and whatever came down. We went there and had a look, and they had a museum, and it was really lovely. And they had those little beehive things that the priest used to be in. And
these are rock formation. They're stone houses built without mortar, and they kind of look like large beehives.
They do look like a beehive.
And holy, this is 5th century sort of holy men huts.
Yeah.
They're lovely, actually.
Yeah, they're lovely. Apparently, they used to be out on the island. I think St. Columba was in one.
Yeah, well, they're still there. The best preserved ones are off the west coast.
Anyway, so we're walking through this museum, looking at everything, and came around the corner, and there were one of these things. And my whole energy body went crackers, and I was sort of an inside-out kind of thing. I felt like I'd been pulled inside out. And I had this massive, reaction to it, like a memory, past life memory of being on one of those, and not there in that spot, but obviously out on one of these islands or something, and being a priest in one of those, or a monk in one of those. And that was okay, except from that, for the rest of the day, I was in the present time, in the past time, in the moment ahead of myself, which was really quite awkward. So I was in those 3 pieces of time for about 24 hours. So as I walked along, I was ahead of myself and behind myself, and it was weird. So if I went to go around a corner, I was around the corner and behind the corner. It was very awkward. It was really quite a bizarre position to be in. And then we went to walk up the hill to see where they buried Maeve. And it was amazing. I'm walking up and I'm seeing all the fairy rings, and then I'm carrying Maeve up the hill as one of her bearers, and it was so crowded with all these people going up and down. It was just bizarre. I was beside myself. Got up the top, and I've actually got one of the stones from the hill, and we buried Maeve, and I'm taking photos. And I said to my husband later, I said, "Oh, gee, wasn't that crowded?" He said, "No, there was no one else but you and I." I thought, "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear." But I thought, there were obviously so many lives in that space stacked on top of themselves. But for me, it was great because I could come home and then work on that and deal with those positions of time and where I'd been and that lifetime and sort them all out. So I'd kind of, obviously, in Ireland, I'd had a fair few lives, physically as well, physically in Roscommon, but also there in that little stone hut, and obviously at the time of Maeve. And, it was just amazing because I reconnected all at once with all these lives. So that's one of the things that you can do when you travel. You can ask to be made aware of where you've been.
So it's medicine. It's very shamanic. It's sort of recollecting pieces of yourself.
Oh yes, and you can come back and you can clear so much karma in those lives. Do your own, whatever your karma clearing thing is for yourself. Clear it for yourself and your family and all those who are associated with yourself, and let it go. Send out your compassion and your love, and it helps you. It helps you in so many ways.
See, this is probably where I get it from, because that's the thing I do all around the UK is find the holy wells, and I have poor James crawling through Neolithic tombs in mid-Wales in the sleet. But for me, my description of it is it's almost like a tuning fork. I need to resonate with that space, and after I've been there, I can resonate with it again. Yeah. And I'm not particularly clairvoyant, so when I go looking for all these Dark Age saints like St Winifred in North Wales, who was decapitated, and go to her well, I can find her again when I'm not at the well.
Yes.
So I know what she feels like.
Yeah.
Because, and I explain it that maybe I'm just not clairvoyant enough. And that's why it's almost like remedial class that I have to go to these places to tuning folk with. But as you can clearly see, that kind of frenetic, high-cost, sacred travel is a family tradition now.
But it's a wonderful thing to do, to go to these energy places. And as you go to them, because you are a spiritual being, you are bringing your energy to it, and you are enriching that space as well. The more we connect these, what have been isolated places with other energies, you are bringing your codes to them as well. I carry fire and water codes, so I bring them to wherever I'm going, and I give them freely to that space. So they are reconnecting with other parts of the earth, and I exchange them, and they exchange them to me. I went to Palenque in the Yucatan, and I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting, because before I even got there, I could hear the conch shell, I could hear the rattling of the thingies, you know, and I could hear the things happening. I thought, oh, this is going to be fun. So it was opening up for me before I got there. I thought, oh, okay. Which is wonderful. I'm not, you know, wow, this is going to be good. So I got in, and a being came to me and said, well, you know, I said, wow, this is great. I want to come around, and I'm here to share. And he would turn me around and physically show me all these things inside Palenque and what was going on. And so we went to all of these sites all the way through. And there was one of the sites which was about food, about they were the one of about producing, you know, honeys and wheats and barleys and vegetables and all sorts of stuff. It was about producing stuff. It wasn't about gold or things like that. And the guy that was travelling with me, he was a spiritual guide, a physical man, and he said, oh, this site's locked, because he was pleased that I was coming, because I could say, well, what was happening at each site. And I said, oh, okay. So I went and stood on what I thought was the pillar, and I stood there, and I said, I want to open it up. I said to them, you know, I've got gifts for you, and they were actually sending things to bite me. I said, no, stop it, I'm here to give it to you. And eventually they did open up, and I could see what they had to offer and things, but it was quite funny, because they were actually sending beads and things from the earth still, and I got to open it up and give them my gifts, and that was really interesting to see what they had. But they were the site there that had more, they lasted longer, and they were richer than all the other sites that were all about ego and things like that, where these people were very much about the earth and the honeys and the growing things. But that whole of that area, the ley lines are so big you can trip over them. They're actually so big coming out of the earth. It was just amazing. But the very last one we went to, I'm sorry about this, I can't remember all the names now. He was a wonderful king, and he was buried in his pyramid. It was the one that they just pulled the vines off, and it was complete. He was buried facing out. And so they're really steep, these things. It climbed up the outside of this thing, and
This pyramid,
yeah, the pyramid. And I was sitting there, and I was talking to the king that had died there, was buried there. And he said, oh, you are Chitpa, Chipa or something, and an X or something. I said to the guy, what does this word mean? He said, oh, it means friend. I said, oh. He said, where did you read that? I said, no, he's just calling me that. And that was the end for this guy. He said, oh my God. Because I could go to each place, and I said, oh, look, there's lots of little children running around at this one. And he said, yeah. He said, oh, yes. And I said, why? I said, well, because this place is all about conception. They all of them have different meanings, these temples. I said, this one's all about conception. And he said, oh. He was beside himself. It was wonderful. And it was so good to have someone who was spiritual being the driver. And
so this was the driver who you were scaring by pointing out what each different part of the complex was for.
Yeah, these as we moved from one temple to the next as we drove around Mexico. And it was just wonderful, because he'd say, oh, quick, go in here, sit in here. And I could sit in, and they had one where all the seers sat. So I went in and sat down with them, and the women's seers sat, and they had they looked like they weren't chicken bones, they were longer bones, maybe bird bones, and they did like a scrying with bird bones. And then I went in with the guys who did the men, and they would go into a trance for several days to do their oracle work. And that was interesting. I put a great big hat on me and I sat around in the circle with them, and they had a really big smoky fire in a cave type, not a cave, it was a stone room thing that they had, and they had this fire, and I thought, God, imagine being in here for days. And they were drinking this stuff. He said, no, they don't drink stuff. Well, just been in there, they do. And then I was watching something about 6 or 8 months later, and they were saying, yes, they actually did drink something.
Yeah, an hallucinogen.
Yeah,
yeah. I know, he was wrong.
I said,
well, America is lousy with them, it's great.
Yeah, I said, well, no, so they were actually drinking stuff in there, and with all this smoke. But yeah, it was just the most amazing place. So that, if you're looking for somewhere with fabulous energy and lots of stuff to tune into, go there. Fabulous.
Nice. You're big on the Americas. Actually, speaking of, I mean, in the magical world, there's a lot of hand-wringing about what's cultural appropriation and what's not, like, is it insensitive? And to be fair, the last 50 years has seen some quite insensitive appropriations of particularly indigenous cultures. We were just talking about, there's a news article in Australia about some arsehole who's paying below minimum wage to Aboriginal women to collect bush tomatoes. So a lot of it goes on, which is just obviously astonishingly bad on every level. But there is something about you in America when you, when you travelled to America before you were married, you had interesting experiences on the sort of First Nations land. Oh,
I did. Yes, I headed off from the Grand Canyon. It was snowing, and
how old were you? When was this?
I was about 23, 24, and I just headed. I've ever had a thing for the Navajo. Not so much the Hopi. Not that I don't like the Hopi, but it's always been the Navajo for me. So I headed off into Navajo land. No worries about that. By myself, driving with a broken arm, and off I went into the Navajo and just drove through. And I went up to the sky dwellings and drove around, and the sheriff just looked at me, little white girl, driving in some big American yank tank, and he just looked, which is really odd to see a fancy car in Indian country in those days. I drove around and looked at everything and went off to these other ancient dwelling things, and I found out it was electing the chief, the Navajo chief. Not meant to. No one said. I told my American friends, "You can't go on Indian land." I said, "Oh, you can't." I happily drove everywhere all over. No one batted an eyelid. There I was, little white girl driving around. Couldn't understand why I couldn't go anywhere, like get anything to eat or drink. And all the Indian people just looked at me. No one said anything. So obviously thought there's someone we know from a past life. Drove happily around, had a lovely time.
Why is there a broken-armed Australian woman
driving?
She's very lost.
She's very lost. Said hello to everybody, and off I went and just kept driving.
Cool. All right. So, I mean, when you think about the story began with you as a child, being berated for having spiritual experiences, and here we are at the end of 2015. What would be your observations, I guess, particularly, having seen a lot of the world, particularly in the West, of the difference between those two? What does spirituality look like now? Are we winning?
Oh, I think we're winning. I think so many people have opened up to themselves and to the deeper part of what it is like to be human and to have a deeper understanding of life and what's beyond life. People are not as concrete as they used to be. Probably, I reckon, 80% of people believe that we're not alone. There's more out there. People have more sensitivity to the spirit world, to their higher consciousness. They don't necessarily believe that God has a beard and that kind of thing. They don't believe in that kind of consciousness. Not so many people believe in that kind of consciousness, but they certainly do believe in the greater consciousness that holds the world together, in that kind of consciousness. I think so anyway, yeah.
So what's your advice then for new people who are now in a world where we are winning, but are maybe thinking, I'm quite interested in this. She was talking about angels, she was talking about energy healing and travel. I mean, I could bring the book question back and say, what advice would you have? Or even, not advice is the wrong word. What information would you share that has been helpful to you?
Oh.
As a Christmas gift.
Well, I think if people want to increase their clairvoyance, you need to get into something like, you need to do more meditation, more energy-based meditation, because that builds the energy body, which allows the whole system to be stronger, so your clairvoyance develops more.
So examples there are pranic healing is one of them.
One of them, yeah.
Reiki, would that work?
Yeah, yeah. And it's not just one a day. It's like you'd have to do 2 strong meditations for a minimum of 36 days. Bang. Every day, 2 a day. Before that kind of thing builds the energy system up, the energetic energy system up. That brings in the clairvoyance. Okay, it's not like staring into a candle. That's not going to do it.
No.
It's not about that kind of activity. It's about strong meditation, and it's about meditation that when it's finished, you're blessing the earth, and it's about compassion. It's putting energy into the earth, so that that's a good thing. But it's also using the energy you brought in, so you're constructive with what you're doing. You're getting it to flow. You're doing something with it. You're being,
You're not just hoarding it.
No, well, it's not that, but you're using it, so you're doing something with it, You're sending it out, so you're actually getting it to flow through your body, so things are working. And from that, you then have a chance of doing something. So each chakra is getting bigger and stronger. So that's the thing. But the angelic stuff's a way to start, because it's an easy way in, and all the consciousness forms into whatever you want it to be. If it's going to come in that way, it comes in the angelic form, because that's what it starts out first.
So, some book suggestions for a beginner. Oh. They can be fiction, although they probably won't be. Difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, there's so many, really.
Yeah. We've spoken about Robert Anton Wilson's Cosmic Trigger. We've spoken about Paul Hewson's Mastering Witchcraft, a bunch of Aleister Crowley books, which is a different road to you, obviously. But so there's genuinely no right or wrong answer here.
No. See, I read a lot of. I'm obviously. Oh gosh, I can't even think of his name there. Most of the people I don't know. Where to start with? Crikeys.
No, you can only pick one.
Okay.
One book.
One book. Oh. I don't think I could do that.
No, it's difficult. That's all right. You've given much in the way of travel advice.
I should start a psychic travel.
Yeah, exactly. Psychic. You could actually. You could be doing tours for this.
I could. I thought about doing tours.
Nice.
People who want to come on a tour. That's right. And I think that's right. I've often thought about that. Taking some people out on a tour somewhere and helping them find their lost souls.
Well, I've been asked to do that as well a couple of times.
Yeah.
So we could go into business, Mother. Yeah.
And so and especially when you go somewhere and you say, well, okay, what's happening to me? Okay, well, this is what's happening to you, and this is really good. And that person beside you is so and so, and da.
See, what I think your book recommendation is that the books are not even secondary; they are a distant tertiary to the practical experience in your own life. There's no substitute for it. And also, and I agree with this because I run my life this way, I think adventures are part of the quest.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. If you get a calling to go somewhere, go. Because they've told you to go and find a bit of yourself.
Yeah, yes, that's a very good spot to end it on. I agree completely. That's your Christmas message from Newcastle, Australia, and I will just turn off the record button now and then do another outro.
There you have it, kids. Just when you thought Rune Soup couldn't possibly get any gayer, I go and have my actual mother as a guest. To me, it was interesting to have this episode follow on from the one with Sarah. As you can probably tell, Mother's magic is not my own, but it seems to me there are a lot of underlying structural parallels. There's the saints, first and foremost, as well as the presence of the dead, and it was interesting to hear her talk about bringing the energy into the earth, particularly when discussing Aboriginal women's magic. There's the same sense of place spirits and physicality and all that stuff that would be familiar to those of a witchier bent. And I don't know why it didn't really occur to me before the episode that it's pretty obvious where I get my proclivity for place-based or site-based magic from, listening to all her stories from different places around the world. She may well resent the nomenclature, but a lot of Mother's stories line up with some discussions Alkistis and I were having about natural magic and witchcraft, insofar as the systems or schools are an irrelevance beside the practice of the spirit or body work. I didn't ask Mother where she could be found online because, that seemed like an odd thing to ask a parent, given that also, let's be frank, you're all a bunch of weirdos off the internet. You're lovable weirdos, but still. However, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that she's actually been doing paid energy healing work in multiple countries for about 20 years for some pretty high-profile clients. So if you're interested in getting in touch, drop me a note at podcast@runesoup.com and I'll forward you along. In terms of questions and comments to tee up, I would love to hear your thoughts or experiences on sacred travel, holy site magic, or anything along, those sort of place-based lines. I'm almost tempted to append a whole cultural appropriation question to that as well, but I don't know, it seems to me like that's a fairly well-flogged horse. Of course, if you've got something you're burning to say in that matter, then definitely have at it. Leave a comment on the blog at runesoup.com or on the Facebook page, or hit me up on Twitter at Gordon, Gordon_White, WHITE. Until next time, have a wonderful Christmas.